Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I am so excited for you to hear this next interview. I have virtually in front of me Melissa Callahan. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and we're going to dive deep into the patterns that don't serve us. As you guys know, I'm currently writing a book about the correlations between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships. And if you saw my TED Talk, you understand how I noted the parallels and all those things. And I'm super excited to have Melissa here to really go deeper into this stuff and to really understand about why we do this, where these patterns come from, how do we break them. I'm so excited. But before we get into the topic, Melissa, why don't you please just introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure, Tony, I'm so excited to be here today. Patterns and stories of origin and why we make the decisions that we make is kind of my life and my life's work. And so I'm so excited to process it all together from my life experience, your life experience, and moving into dating, which wasn't always easy for me, and food and dieting wasn't easy too. So I'm so excited to co-create this space together and just see what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. So the first question I always ask, is kind of like three separate parts, is as a way to partly introduce yourself, is to share who you are, what you do, and then the most important part to that is why you do what you do. And feel free to go as deep as you want into that story or keep it surface, whatever you feel, and we'll just go from there.
Awesome. Well, I could go deep, but then I don't want, this is all about not only talking about me for our time together today, but I think the best way that I could say it is that, as you mentioned, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and sometimes people see that and they think that I only work with relationships. That definitely is the core of the people that I get to support. And so I do consider myself more of a relationship expert and a relationship healer. But really what that title is about thinking systemically, thinking about not only just what we're going through and what's going through our heart and our minds, but where have we come from? What has been the environment around us, not only within our family, but even within our communities, within our society, within our culture. And so looking at how all of that has had an impact on the parts of ourselves that we show to the world, the parts of ourselves that we hide, and definitely has a huge part of the people that we surround ourselves with, whether it's a romantic relationship or friends, and family is a huge component of that. And so I started doing this because I don't know, Tony, I think I've experienced almost every single type of relationship you could, from having blended family experiences, my parents being divorced and getting remarried, seeing their dating lives, one be successful, one be a hot mess, going through my own personal relationships, and now being married and having children of my own. It feels like my life was written to become a person that helps other people with their relationships. And so that's what brought me to my calling. And so that's kind of what brought me here to meeting you today and getting to have this conversation.
Yeah, it's just, I love, here's the thing. I feel bad for those who don't have, and I don't want to say feel bad. That's probably the wrong term, but there are a lot of professionals that go into the field because they personally had struggled with it and that's what drove them there. But there are some really great professionals out there that didn't have that personal experience. They're still really good. So I don't want people to think that they're less than able to help you just because they didn't personally go through it. But I do believe that there is that extra added layer that helps you to be a better practitioner when you've personally have gone through struggles and kind of been in it. Although everyone's experiences are unique to them, there are certain situations that I feel like you could genuinely empathize with a client because you've been there.
You said it, empathy. Yeah. That's all that was just coming up for me, is that it's empathy, and it just allows us to connect more from our human experience, and it just makes it easier to support people if you've been there before.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump right in, because I feel like this is going to be such a juicy topic. I'm super excited to get there. So I guess the basic question we want to start with is, where do these patterns start from and stem from? When does it begin for us?
the honest answer and the scientific answer is that it starts when you're in the wound of your mother, whatever that meant to you. And it only gets thicker, and these patterns start when you're a little person. If you really think about it, challenge yourself to think about, the first time that you celebrated a birthday, the first time that you had your heart broken, the first time that you cried and you needed something. All of that, all of those individual experiences were organized by the people around you. So you might have had, when we celebrate, some families are big into drinking alcohol to celebrate, or lots of food. And there's a culture component to that. But then there's also, people when they cried because they fell down, they might have a parent that says, walk it off, you're fine. Or they might have a parent that makes a big deal out of it. And those are the moments that organize our world. So from the jump, we start realizing what's okay, what's not okay, what are we allowed to do, and what are we not allowed to do? What are the things that are praised, and what are the things that are shamed? And so all of these patterns and our decision making just starts from the jump. And I know that sounds like a cliche answer, but it's cliche because it's so profound, that our world starts then.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense. Would you say that when people start to recognize the patterns is as they get older, and maybe when they're not, like when they're separating from their parents or from the environment they grew up in, or does it kind of show up for people in other areas, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do think we have sort of this inner truth. Like, we have this part of us that, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. I know I have, but that truth where you're kind of looking around and you're like, something's a bit off here. Even if you're a really tiny person, you just might know it's not off. It might be more obvious. Like, what's happening right now does not feel good to me. All my alarm systems are going off, and I know that this isn't okay. Or there's more subtleties where it's like, this is my normal. This is my family. Relationships fight a lot, or relationships don't really show affection, or we're not allowed to eat certain foods because that doesn't make us look good in our clothes, right? Like, just all these ways. And then when you start to launch out of your family into your independence, that's when I do believe you start to really look back and reflect and think about, wow, do I believe that? Or was that something that was projected onto me?
Yeah. So I think what might be helpful for the listeners now is, like, we're going to really be talking about mostly patterns that don't serve us, but I am a positive person, and I do want to also, are there patterns that do serve us? And maybe, like, is there a way to identify which are things that, like, are good, and which are things that, like, we should maybe try to break those?
Absolutely. I think that, it's so important to recognize that we've all been through hard stuff, but it doesn't mean that the hard stuff is because someone was, you know, failing you incredibly or teaching you bad things. I think that sometimes it's about personal preference too. And so when we talk about patterns that serve us, it really is about just getting to know yourself and your personal values and finding out what overlaps with what you already know and works for you, but then also recognizing what creates some discomfort or pain or a pattern of sadness or disappointment or sense of a rejection or abandonment, and starting to learn, like, ooh, okay, this seems to be a theme that's happening in my life. What's my part? What do I contribute here, and how can I break that? Because there's plenty of great patterns that we all carry with us that we don't want to let go of.
Yeah. So, okay. So there are certain patterns, like I'm thinking of, like, if we're going to go more towards the ones that we want to break. So personally, I work with a lot of people who come to me almost as their last resort, to be honest. They've done all of, like, the diets, the quick fixes, the fads, and they finally recognize this doesn't serve me, right? And now I'm helping them to get to a place where they're focusing more on their habits and why and what's important to them and everything that you kind of just said.
Yeah.
Which is great that they realize that. But I find that there's a lot of people that, even when they realize that, they still don't reach out for help. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like,
Absolutely.
so here's and I'll use the example that I talk about in my book. Like, at some point I did recognize that with my dating, I wasn't choosing the right men, like the ones that either were, like, emotionally unavailable or just like weren't like a long-term partner, like just things that just were not sitting well. And I had recognized it, yet I still would date men like that, like even knowing it. Like there was like a part of like, there was like, I guess maybe because there's stages, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling right now.
I'm with you. I've
But
dated
like,
those men too. Maybe the
like,
same ones.
like, how do you, I guess the point is like, when you know it, when you recognize it, like, why do we, and maybe it's like self-sabotage. Like, why do we still go back? It's like, here's this diet. We know it's like, yeah, it looks like a different diet, but really it's all based off of restriction. We know it's going to end in the same results. Like we know
Yes.
it's going to, you're just going to gain the weight back, or you're going to be miserable, or you're not going to have any energy, or it's going to be short-lived or whatever. Yet we do it anyway.
Yes.
Why?
Well, great question. Because I've been that sabotager, and you know what? I'll probably do it again in life because we are imperfect people. That it takes a long time to understand yourself in the journey. But to speak to exactly what you're saying is that there is this idea that we try to have corrective experiences as beings. And so even when we know something isn't working for us, there's that hopeful part of us that almost thinks, kind of that control part of us that thinks, but if I just do something different, or if I just try it again and I work harder, can I make this work? Because that corrective experience may offer us some healing that we never got. Or it may, that fighting for that thing that we know isn't working can prolong us actually needing to admit that something was never there, or grieving something that we've lost. And so when you're talking about, I mean, we want to go into the men piece of it's like, well, if you're familiar with emotionally unavailable people, because if you had emotionally distant caregivers or partners in the past, you lean towards that because it's what you know.
Right.
So you're like,
Comfort.
I know what to do here. Right. Exactly. This is predictable for me. So let me lean into this because this is predictable for me. So I know what my role is in that relationship. Like you said, with some of the restrictive diets, we also know the end result, that I feel left alone, or I feel like I'm over functioning in the relationship because they're not leaning into me in the same way. And so that awareness is really hard. The awareness is the first bit. Processing it is the second bit, and then the change, the breaking of the patterns is sort of the last bit. So there's some lead up to it.
And then I feel like at the core is the fear. Like it's like, because that's all they know, right? It's the fear of being able to either keep up with it, or to like, it's just, they don't know it. Like you said, it's not familiar.
Completely unknown.
Yeah, I am curious. I feel like this is a little bit off topic, but I do think it's super important because it comes up a lot in my sessions and just what I see, and in personal experience as well. Like I really do feel like we as humans self-sabotage a lot. Like a lot. So I'm curious for you, like in your experience working with clients, like is that considered a pattern? And how does one recognize, if they are self-sabotaging, or they feel like they're on the verge of self-sabotage, and maybe they have the awareness that they're even able to recognize it as such? What would you recommend that they do to avoid that?
I think you're spot on. That self-sabotage piece happens so much. I think the tough bit is that we don't know we do it. I mean, the fact that we're able to even talk about it is a huge, like if we were talking about this therapeutically, that would be a huge marker that someone would be able to even acknowledge I'm self-sabotaging. But I do think the key to recognizing that it's sabotage is recognizing that, is there a connection to this person or this thing that you are trying to create that you've never had? And I don't know, maybe when we talk about dating, it's like, am I trying to make something happen, or am I trying to forge a relationship forward that I never got earlier in life? And that's the difficult part, is that if you can recognize that you're trying to gain some healing in the present moment from a past pain, that is when you could say, wait a second, this isn't working for me. I'm trying to take control over something that was done to me by doing something unhealthy to myself now.
Right. And when you say it just like that, it sounds so like, why would I do that to myself?
Right.
like it's so okay, like let me not do this then. But like when we're
Yep.
in it, it's just so different. It's so
You are
crazy.
so right. It's so easy. Like, have you ever had that friend or that family member that you know is kind of dating like a bit of a train wreck? But
Mhm.
I know for me, I can look at that situation and I can say that's so not good for that person, and I worry about them. They're going to get hurt, but I know that I've been in that same situation too.
Right.
And I know that when I was in it, because I wasn't speaking, you don't speak, like you don't think from your logic when the emotion is
Right.
big on the inside of you.
Right.
Emotion just takes over. It wins
Right.
all.
Right. Always. So I guess going off of that then, do you have any recommendations for someone to help kind of sift through those emotions so that they are thinking more clear? Like, well, I guess it goes, that saying like, is it your head or your heart talking? Like, I feel like we want to go from our heart, right? Because our heart, I feel like our heart and our gut, they're very much like they're very like instinctual. But
Yes.
then like our head sometimes gets in the way. But then I think sometimes when it comes to like relationships and diet and self-sabotage and all those things, sometimes we need to like remove the emotional component so we can think more clearly. I could be completely off, but
No,
I'm curious kind of
that
what
bit.
your thoughts are there, because you hear that like follow your heart, right? You hear follow your heart, but like my heart has led me to some really unhealthy situations, let me
Yep.
tell you. So how does one separate those?
Well, that's the important bit of it too. I love the way that you're saying, like, people tell me to follow my heart and my heart's getting me into these terrible positions, because
Seriously.
I agree with you. My heart is not, my heart is wounded.
Right.
And so
Right.
my heart, it gets confused sometimes.
Right.
It gets confused. And for me, this has been a huge part of my personal healing, but then also the healing that I encourage others is that how do we experience a feeling or allow an emotion to exist without me having an action behind it?
Mm.
Right? It seems easy, but it's like, oh, wait, I feel something and I don't have to do something to get rid of it. Oh, wait, I can actually just let it be and process it.
Yeah, I want to just zone in on probably 70% of the people that listen to this podcast are fixers. So they're
Mm-hmm.
people, which is once again a great skill to have, someone who wants to be self-improving and always changing and making things better.
Right.
But when it's misplaced and you become like that fixer and you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed, or it's not your responsibility to fix, the person who hurt you as a child, it's their responsibility, but you have to let that go because they're not saying sorry, like it's gone, it's done. So your responsibility is just to heal. You don't always have to do anything.
Right. It's to
Yeah.
heal. Oh, I love the way that you're piecing this all together, Tony, because you're right there with me, because we try, we're those fixers, and I might be one too. I mean, I'm a therapist, come on. Um, so it's pretty obvious that I have that part of me, but it's like, am I trying to take control over something that was never mine? That was
Mm,
never mine to do. If I had needs that weren't tended to as a little person, that was painful, but it wasn't my fault.
mm,
And so am I trying to fix something that was never mine to begin with? And
mhm.
when we can get there, we can grieve the relationship or the person or the things that we never got. And it's not that those people were bad. It's just that they might not have had the skills to give us what we needed back then.
Mhm.
And so then, oh, now that I can feel my own grief around never having that, and I can separate their actions from mine, I can realize that what happened back then was never about me. It was actually about them. And
Mhm.
I have empowerment now to make different choices for myself. I can break patterns. I don't need to lean into the relationship that was modeled in front of me, or I
Mhm.
don't need to pick a relationship that feels similar to me. I can be brave and go into a relationship that is so scary because it's so different than what we know, but the scariness doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. It could lead to something incredibly healthy and
Mhm.
healing.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, what advice would you give to someone who has had these experiences from childhood and they're really trying to find their own kind of their new way? Maybe they do recognize like, listen, these patterns don't serve us. Like this was how, my parents raised me, but that's not how I want to raise my kids. So how would one kind of break those patterns? I know I feel like we're talking very broad. So if you want to talk about a specific,
Sure,
like,
sure.
that maybe that'll be easier for people to
Yeah.
digest, but.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the tough thing is too, and I think the broadness about it is because everyone's process is so personal.
Mhm.
And so we absolutely can talk a little bit about some more actionable things that people can put into place for themselves. But one, I think it's knowing who are your safe people in your life. And I mean safe more emotionally, of course, physically, and all those other ways that people can be safe too, but really kind of looking around you and saying, this is my friend that I've had forever, or this is the family member that I know that I could always share things with and be vulnerable with. And they didn't judge me, or they didn't, they always accepted me.
Mhm.
For me, I think part of the healing process is having our pain being witnessed. So if you're in a position where you can't go to therapy, or that feels expensive, which I totally understand, or it kind of feels scary because it's a hard process to go into, it's looking at those loved ones around you and saying, I've been wanting to process some things that are really hurtful to me. Would you be open to listening to me?
Mm.
And allowing that person to hear some of your pain. And that is another corrective experience, knowing that I can be vulnerable with someone that is safe and healthy for me. And that might help my pain be seen differently so that I can let go of it and maybe make a healthier choice.
Mhm.
But outside of connections, there's all sorts of ways. I think meditation and mindfulness is a beautiful way. And there's so many great apps out there. I specifically love Calm and Insight Timer as a gateway into some guided meditation. And it just, all the research shows that it slows down our brain and it rewires connections, so that we can process information, like we were saying earlier, to bring it back. My heart's feeling something, but my head's saying something else. Now I have this skill to slow myself down to help myself make the wise decision, not
Mhm.
simply the intellectual decision or smart decision or the emotional decision. I can go right in the middle and find the
Mhm.
combination of both.
Mhm. Yeah, I also find too, just like the slowing down process, I feel like we force, like we want answers to come to us, like we want to just know what to do, we want it to be done, we want to feel better, like, and when we slow down, we sometimes the answers come to us, but also sometimes we just feel better. Like we just start to realize, like, oh, it's not that bad. Like I'm gonna be okay. Like,
Yes.
and that alone I think is super powerful. So although, yeah, the science behind like how our brain tissues are could reconnect, and it's like a really great, practice and all that, I think is really awesome. But I think just like letting people know that like just the calming down, the slowing down, like that alone can actually just make you recognize like everything's gonna be okay.
You're absolutely right. I think that speaks to kind of the earlier bit that we were talking about. You can feel something without needing to act.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to be a faster person. So that was a huge thing for me as that fixer. Like, no, I could do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
But that slowing down, like, can I just allow this discomfort to exist and know it's going to go away and I'm going to be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Is what you just kind of beautifully articulated.
Awesome. Good. Great. All right. So now I guess I'm wondering, what about the person who specifically, because this is a nutrition podcast,
Mm-hmm.
the person who really has like, you've worked with someone where you've watched them, although it's not, I know with therapy, the main conversation is not usually, food, unless you're a food therapist, right? But like
Mm-hmm.
but stuff about their body pops up, stuff about them trying this new diet pops up, like, and you kind of hear and listen to the patterns of them, you know going from one diet to another diet, and then feeling bad or down about themselves, like why couldn't they you know do this one or lose the weight or whatever it is. How does someone break that pattern
I think that,
specifically?
oh, yes. I think that what I want to also speak to is that even if I'm meeting someone that doesn't talk about food as an issue of theirs, it somehow comes up because we all have such a dynamic and complicated relationship with food and what it
Mm-hmm.
means to us and our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
specifically women, in the way that we may have felt pressure to look a certain way and maybe have assigned that to a certain weight. And
Mm-hmm.
then we get fixated on that weight.
Mm-hmm.
For me, a huge curiosity that I will dive into with someone that seems to be really struggling and seems to be in this like grappling battle with weight and diet and the cycle of that, which I know you're incredibly familiar with, but is what do they think is going to happen once they hit this goal?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that question has been so transformative for so many people, because what comes out of that is a scary understanding that maybe we've assigned what we look like or what our weight is to what our worth is as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's how can I detach that? How can I have my health goals and my
Right.
fitness goals, but those not be connected to who I am or the worth that I have or how lovable I am.
Right. Or like to go on a date. Like there's so many people that come to me that are like, I just don't feel comfortable dating right now because I'm not at the size I want to be.
Right.
And the saddest part about that, sometimes people come to me with like a lot of weight to lose. And so I could almost understand it. But also but I'm not saying that they should not date. I'm not saying that at all.
Of
I'm just saying
course.
like it would be a significantly different look. And so somehow I could understand their logic. But then there's those people that come to me that have to lose like 5 or 10 pounds. Like, I'm sorry, but like nobody is going to know the difference
But it's them,
between like
right?
what you look 5 or 10 pounds, and like no man is going to know that difference if that's the reason why you're not going on a date. So, and like that's the saddest thing is most people are obsessing over losing the last 5 or 10 pounds rather than like focusing on things that are actually important in life and that actually matter. And I'm curious because I wonder, you know, this is actually like the exact chapter of the book I'm writing right now, so it hasn't been fully pieced together, but like where I feel like a lot of what people really need to do the deeper work with is like, what am I avoiding? Like, what am I not like? I just think it's just so easy to put our
Mm.
pain and everything on to attach to our weight because that's the society that we live in, and it's almost like socially acceptable that like, oh yeah, I'm trying to lose like 5 more pounds or 10 more pounds or 20 more pounds, whatever it is. But like, that's probably not even the issue.
You're absolutely right. Like spot on, Tony, because that's kind of tying into if I hit this weight, I will be happy.
Mm-hmm.
If I hit this weight, someone will be attracted to me.
Mm-hmm.
If I do this, then, if I do this, then, that externalization of our happiness, our fulfillment, our joy, that it's outside of us, that it's something that we need to be constantly hustling for. And what you're zeroing in on so wonderfully is that what is wrong with who you are as you are today?
Mm-hmm.
What's painful about who you are, or what's sad or hard or difficult? Because that's that avoidance bit. It's like, well, if I get this weight, if I look like this, if I wear my skinny jeans, whatever the thing is,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll be happy. But people will reach those goals eventually. And then they might still be sitting in the sense that that was that momentary joy and accomplishment of I hit my goals. If you're recognizing that after that goal, you're still feeling that lack of fulfillment or joy, then there's something there that you've been avoiding.
Yeah, definitely.
There's something there underneath of all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
right? Big one.
No, I mean, it's so true. It's so true. Like, it's whatever we think the problem is never really the problem. Like,
Yeah.
so if someone's like trying to, and the sad part is people spend their whole entire life trying to get to a certain number, thinking it's magically going to be better. And then they miss out on the current things that are so amazing about their life.
Yeah.
Like, I hope people who are listening to this right now can just really, really like let that sink in.
Yes.
Like, what about your life is so terrible that, you know, being 5 pounds lighter is going to make this drastic difference? Like, probably nothing.
Absolutely.
Right. And if whatever it is terrible, I'm sorry you're going through that, but chances are it has nothing to do with your weight.
Absolutely. Because that whole idea of that our perception is our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that if we're perceiving that this weight is why we are blank, 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 unhappy, uncomfortable, whatever it is, then that's what we're going to believe. But if we're able to slow down and be grateful for what is present while also having these goals, because those are great.
Yeah, you can have both.
Yes,
right? We're not
I love duality.
Yeah, we're not saying you can't try to, you know, I said this quote once and I hate when I quote myself and then I screw it up. But like but like you can basically, I don't remember what it was, so I'm not even gonna say it. But like you can't, like, you can want to change your body, you just can't hate your way into wanting to change your body,
Oh,
because then you're going to get there and you're still going to hate your body. And that's what's so sad.
absolutely. I
Right.
love that. And, as being a person that I think that, just a little self-disclosure, I would go do a little bit of yo-yoing in my 20s, probably also because of just too much partying and not healthy decisions. But I also have had two children. And so that experience too of like my body not being my own. And I would get caught up in that. I would get caught up in that. Well, I've had this baby and I need to reclaim my body again by getting it back to my pre-baby weight or my wedding weight or
Mhm.
whatever it was. And I found myself really needing to reflect on what is it that am I trying to gain a sense of control when I feel really out of control because I have, two children now and I'm doing the best I can, but this is scary. And
Mhm.
so it's also looking at that, like that focus that we can put on our weight or our image. Is that because what we're really going through is also hard or feels unmanageable or
Mhm.
overwhelming? And so we're zeroing in on that
Mhm.
as a way to feel like, okay, I feel in control.
I feel like it always comes down to control. Would you agree? I feel
I,
like we almost always use food or our bodies or exercise. We didn't even talk about exercise, or relationships. I feel like that is it. It's all stems down to like wanting to control the outcome. Am I on?
I
Okay.
I'm with you, and I'm going to add a layer to that because when we feel that we're in the illusion of control, we feel safe.
Yeah.
And so that's it. You're right. Like
Yeah.
if we can feel in control, then it gives us this sense of safety.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. Feeling safe in the world gives us confidence and helps us make hard decisions.
So yeah, so speaking to that then, how can we gain a sense of control or empowerment? I like that you use the word empowerment. I use that as well with my clients to create that that safety net. Not so much to keep us safeguarded and non-growing, but just to help us feel safe to grow.
Hmm.
Or is there anything specifically, we mentioned things like meditation, or is it different? Like, is it engaging in things that we enjoy? Is it, I mean, I know what I do with my clients when it comes to nutrition, it's like finding the foods that they like and they enjoy that agree with their body. But I'm wondering if there's any other sort of like techniques or tips for someone to just feel like they are in control, but in a healthy way. So instead of saying in control of your diet, I say in charge. It just sounds more
Mm,
empowering that way. So creating that safety net, but without going overboard, and like
yeah.
without it being with where it's helpful, not hurtful.
Yeah. I think that, part of me is, struggling because I think there's some really like tips, right? We can go into and we want that. And then also it's really that reflection of what I'm grasping at trying to gain so much control, but in that, am I actually giving my sense of control away to others? So if
Mm,
I say, if only my boyfriend or in my case, my husband were to do this, then I would feel better. And so it's recognizing how much do we actually give away. And so I do agree it's connected to that safety within and looking at like, how do I create some safety within myself right now, which I believe goes back to emotion identification and regulation. So that stillness that like, okay, I'm feeling discomfort now. What would be soothing for me? A lot of the times for me, and I think my clients too, is movement, whatever that
yeah.
means for them. It might be working out. It might be going for a walk. It might be dancing with the music loud in their house. But how
Hmm.
do I just work out this energy that I'm feeling in a way that doesn't need to have so much pressure
Right.
associated with it? And it could be short term and it could be quick. I also think getting outside can be like, that's the way I can feel safe. I can remind myself of get out of the focus and the headspace of what needs to happen and experience the broader world around us, and
Hmm.
really getting into a gratitude practice can help that as well, because that helps you recognize what already exists instead of chasing other things.
Yeah, I love that. What I heard picked up on there is like changing your perspective in some way. So sometimes we need to do that through physical movement to help
Hmm.
us, or physical location, like going out in a different room or going outside. But like you just said, also just like thinking about like, what do I need? What can serve me right now?
Yes.
And stop focusing on like the actual thing that's probably not the real thing that we should be focusing on.
Well, right. Because what you just said is it. Exactly, Tony. What can I do right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not working in the present moment, that's that experience of giving away our control. It's like it's got something else needs to happen in order for me to control. But no. What can I do right now? Whether it's movement, whether it's music, whether it's meditation, whether it's a shower, whether it's being outside, whether it's connecting with a loved one, those are the things that we could do right now to get that safety within.
Right.
That hopefully grounds us.
Right. Well, that's good because that's going to bring you to, it's either going to take you out of what you were currently experiencing or thinking, or lead you towards something better. But what most people I find will usually do in those situations is they'll turn to food, or they'll numb. And like, listen, there's nothing wrong with using food to cope sometimes. There's nothing wrong with numbing out to Netflix sometimes. Like, there's nothing wrong with those as outlets sometimes. But if they're your only ways and they're not really super productive, right? They're not really helping you. They're like kind of putting a Band-Aid on the thing, but they're not really getting to like the root cause of like what's happening and how you can heal from, whatever's coming up.
It's that the way that I, kind of talk about what you're mentioning right now is what's distraction and what's avoidance. So yeah, I will go into Netflix and I will have a cookie when I want to have a cookie and those things, but that might be that momentary distraction. And I need to be honest with myself.
Right.
Am I doing that so much that it actually has turned into avoidance?
Right. Right.
And so I think that one of the things that I want to make sure that I make space for in my conversation with you is that I think that one of the reasons that we turn to food so much, and you can speak to this probably better than I can, is because of the sensory experience it gives us, right? There's usually, you could look at it, but then there's usually smells and there's tastes associated it, and some of them even touch. And usually we turn to igniting our five senses to get ourselves grounded and feel safe again. And so that's an important conversation too of, for the people that are listening or for your clients specifically, what's going on for you before you reach for that extra snack that you weren't planning on having today.
Yeah.
Just that honest kind of check-in. And it doesn't mean you can't have that snack. You just still have that snack.
Definitely 100%. That's always what I tell my clients. Just pause and check in. What is it that I need right now? Sometimes the answer might be the cookie. Most of the time though, it's really not, to be honest. Most of the time it's a walk. I need to read. I'm stressed out. I need a bubble bath. I need to go to sleep. I need a walk, whatever that is, that's usually what it is. Not in the food. Although, like I say, it's totally acceptable. Sometimes we just don't want it to be the only coping mechanism.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm organizing myself and definitely organizing it for your listeners, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Right. If you're feeling out of sorts, if you're feeling like that struggle with control, we all have done that. And the things that you can do that might be different than turning to food is engage your senses in whatever way that means, whether it's through movement, getting outside to see nature or experience the fresh air, whether it's a hot shower or cold shower, or engaging your other senses of listening to music, just all the different ways that we can engage our senses in a way that isn't snacking that you didn't plan on snacking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And added to that,
yes,
if you do end up snacking, you can also use your five senses while you eat.
Yes.
As a form of mindfulness. So that way you genuinely enjoy whatever that snack is and can remove that guilt that often comes with it when it's unplanned.
Yes. I love that.
Really enjoy it.
I love that. I will remind myself of that the next time I go for a piece of chocolate, because there's Halloween candy in my house.
Yeah.
And so that might be happening for me over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, definitely. You gotta, that, because you slow it down and then you have the amount that you actually want rather than, overdoing it and being like, I don't even enjoy that. Like, you eat it while you're standing up, but like, if you can really like sit with it and smell it and look at it and think about like how you want to enjoy it. Like, do you want to just like have the candy corn by itself, or do you like want to put it in like a yogurt? Do you want to like, have it. Do you want the
Mix it
chocolate
up.
ones? Do you want the regular ones? Like make it an experience.
I
Because
love that.
otherwise then you're just going to be like, why did I just do that? And you're just going to like, I don't know. That's where the diet cycle stuff comes up. But
yes, and that shame that comes up, like that, the way that we could just be so hard on ourselves when
so
we
hard on ourselves.
go outside of our diet or our plan and trying so hard to get out of that, because it only creates that more stress and cortisol within our bodies, which makes it even harder to lose the weight.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, guys, I feel like the last few recordings I've had with some guests, the topic of conversation, like somehow stress always somehow weaves its way in. Like you stressing about your diet is more unhealthy than the weight that you think, the excess weight on your body that you feel like you need to lose. So it's really, really important to manage your stress over everything and anything. Because when you think about it, when we manage our stress, we think more clearly, we're happier, we tend to make healthier choices. Like we tend to engage in behaviors that feel good to us. So
maybe even pick a partner that is that healthier choice for us.
Definitely. So yeah, stress management is like everything.
Yeah, because then we're not going to the quick fix of the soothing.
Yeah.
And that's, and I'm sure stress is coming up because, the world that we're living in is quite stressful right now. And so I think it's even more important to drive home your point. It's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Any other things, tips, comments, things we didn't talk about that you feel like would be helpful for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think I just love this experience. I love being able to talk about it with you and interweave the way that our stories and the patterns and the relationships that are around us really have an impact on the way we view ourselves, the way that we can be hard on ourselves and judge ourselves, which ultimately is going to inform the way we communicate and the decisions that we make. And so I love being able to piece it all together. I think that, there could be like 10 conversations about this because it's such a rich topic, but how there is a theme of focusing on the self first. What are the values that you hold? How can you show gratitude for what exists? How can you manage your stress through mindfulness and emotion regulation so that you can make the choices that you feel good about while detaching your image or what you look like in the mirror or that weight, that scale from who you're worth or what your worth is as a human being. Feels like that is the big part of what the essence of what you and I have pieced together today, that that's kind of my final reflection that I'm sitting in.
Yeah, definitely. And I couldn't agree more. This has been so powerful, super helpful. If somebody wanted to, I don't know how it works, if they wanted to work with you or if they wanted to get in contact with you, how could people follow you or just let you know that they enjoyed the podcast?
Yeah, well, I think you and I connected on Instagram. And so my Instagram handle is Relational Healer. And so they can always get in contact with me through that. I have my website linked up through that way, and always working with clients. But even if it's just to connect and share a couple messages with one another, I'm open to it all because I love connecting with other people. And so that I welcome that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. It's been an absolute pleasure. You guys go give her a follow. Definitely follow the Tips with Tony podcast on Instagram as well.
Yes.
If you liked anything about this, share your takeaways, share it on your story, tag me, tag Melissa. And if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. If you want to write a review, that'd be super awesome. But anyways, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you guys next time. As always,
Thank you.
Melissa.
Bye.
All right, bye guys. This is Tony, your dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.